if you know how to retrieve data programmatically, that's actually the only skill you need. I think we neglect the velocity gain that something like Cursor and Claude can give to a single engineer. Travel agents that book my travel, human beings that I predict will not have jobs in the next few years. Right?
You were a keynote speaker today at Infobip Shift, and you talked about how generative AI is for everybody. So my first question for you would be, how did you start in this field, and why generative AI is kind of the field of your interest, and what was your career path so far?
Oh, that's 3 big questions. We could spend like 30 minutes on it. How did I start in this field of generative AI was, I think, not so unique. I played with ChatGPT and I was like, wow. But actually before ChatGPT, there was Stable Diffusion, an open source model. So that's where it started. I saw my good friend Vincent Reamer, he's an engineer at Meta. He has, I don't know what he has a very powerful machine with powerful GPUs that can very effectively fine-tune Stable Diffusion using Green Booth so that you upload like 30 selfies and then you can generate yourself in any context. Cool. Yeah, and so he did this and I was like, wow, that's crazy, how does that work? And so I learned how to do that. I did that with myself. And that was sort of my starting into Gen AI, and it was around a few weeks into this, maybe months, where ChatGPT came out, and I was like, oh wow. And then the rest is history. And then, very quickly after using ChatGPT, especially early ChatGPT, you recognize limitations with it. Like it doesn't have real-time context and so on. And that's how I started. Yeah.
Cool, that's very interesting. And how would you say that AI has changed the way we do software development? A lot of developers are afraid it's going to take away their jobs, but also a lot of developers are finding it very helpful. So what is your perspective? And are we actually moving towards a future where AI is going to create everything and we're not going to be able to do anything with it? What's that going to look like?
I think the tooling that exists today is really great, especially tools like Cursor and Claude that you can combine. You've probably heard a lot of people do that. I think it's great. I don't think it'll ever replace engineers, for the same reason being that there's still painters today and cameras exist. And as human beings, there are crafts that we do that are high value, that we love, that we'll never stop doing. For example, I use the example of coffee. There's very highly efficient ways of making coffee. There's an press a button that exists. But I think we both know at least one person who spends way too much money on just a brush and like a grinder, and they like go really hard.
Yeah.
One of my uncles-in-law, his routine in the morning is he wakes up and he has like actual wheat, like whole wheat, and he grinds it and makes flour, and he slowly makes a bread roll, and that's his breakfast. Now you could say all of this is gone with machines, but is it? Like, it just changes, and people who love it will continue to do it. I love to code, and so no machine is ever going to replace me, because whether a machine can do it better or not, I will still do it. But then there's a question for, okay, but can it replace people like commercially who wouldn't do it as a hobby? This, yes, for sure. It's already happening. There's a team of travel agents that book my travel, human beings that I predict will not have jobs in the next few years, right?
Yeah, probably. So would you agree that maybe it's going to be more of architecture, focus on, the art of coding and good architecture and scalable code, rather than just manually typing away whatever, comes to your mind?
I would argue that it's not even that today. Like, nobody really, as far as maybe nobody's a big statement, but as far as I know, people tend to not have much interest in, I'm just going to write this and it's going to compile it, whatever. There are few, but and maybe because I go to conferences, this number is inflated, but most engineers I know are the kinds of people who, if they have some small bug in their code, they won't be able to sleep until it's fixed. They like it nags at them. And I know this because so many people talk to me about how they're struggling to set boundaries. I need to go to sleep, but this problem I need to, and so how can a person like that be replaced with a machine? It's like a disease in their mind, like in a good way. Like, they love it. They love the problem. I'm like that. But I think AI will replace engineers who want to be replaced. And I think when we talk about this question, we sort of dismiss or don't consider the idea that there's tons of people working as software engineers who just don't want to be it. I wish I could be a musician instead. And then, well, guess what? Now you can, because a machine can take this job it could maybe even earn you money somehow, and then it funds your hobby. That could be something.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And you know, we've seen the rise of instant programmers. You know, without any engineering background, just people just trying to make money, or they have heard that it's a profitable industry, so they want to be a part of it, but without any real passion about programming. So yeah, that's definitely going to be a problem for them. When we're talking about smaller to mid-sized corporations, so we're talking about, let's say, like 200 to 1,000 employees, are they actually going to see any benefits with AI? Are smaller companies seeing the benefits, and does it actually take a lot of resources and money to just pick the fruits from AI?
Yeah, across the board, so small and large. I think we neglect the velocity gain that something like Cursor and Claude can give to a single engineer. So that's one thing. You move a lot faster no matter what scale you have. And if you're a company with 1,000 people and they're all engineers, then it's 1,000 people moving really fast, which may be equivalent to 2,000 people, right? I wish we could do like an actual experiment. In fact, I probably will design one, given enough funding. But if that exists, I think we wouldn't be surprised if we see across the board, the more engineers you had pre-AI, that number goes up, even though the number of engineers stay the same post-AI. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a huge accelerator.
Yeah, very interesting. And you said in your talk, AI is still not perfect. There's hallucinations. There's a lot of issues that also come with the application of AI. But you mentioned RAG models.
Yeah.
So can you maybe explain in very short what would be RAG and how can we utilize it to make AI problems smaller or disappear even?
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning. RAG is not a type of model, right? It's just a technique, and it can be done. You can reason about RAG in English, which just stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. You retrieve context from somewhere, anywhere, the internet, a database, whatever, and you use that context in your prompt to augment the generated output from a large language model. Retrieval Augmented Generation. So if I want to ask the very smart assistant, ChatGPT, if I should take an umbrella to go out, previously they've updated, they actually use RAG now in ChatGPT, but before this, it would just say, as a large language model, my training ended on September of 2021, and then I don't know. But now with RAG, this also, again, I need to emphasize, ChatGPT itself uses RAG.
Yeah.
What it will do is it will retrieve the weather data and then augment your prompt to also change its generated output. So it will literally get weather data, be like, okay, yeah, it looks like it's going to be rainy tomorrow. Yes, take an umbrella. And that's all RAG is. It's getting real-time context and giving it to an LLM. It gets more interesting for large, and you mentioned large companies, medium, small to medium, and even large. If you have a large enterprise and you've got tons and tons of user data or even user behavior data, this becomes awesome. And it calls for RAG, but like on your data. So imagine like Amazon.com, they know everybody intimately. They know what you like. There was this controversy where Amazon sent a girl pregnancy supplies before she knew she was pregnant. Yeah, and that's because they...
So advanced.
Sorry?
Very advanced.
Yeah, they spy on people.
Yeah.
And with all of this data, if you use RAG on custom enterprise data, you could really serve your users very, very well. And you could also anonymize it such that the LLM doesn't need to know who, it just needs to know this user ID would like to see these products, And that's sort of what we do at DataStax is we work with very large companies to be like, look, you have all this data, operationalize it with Gen AI.
Yeah, I mean, in European Union, you have this additional challenge of being compliant with GDPR, of course. But I can even see RAG being applied and, still provide personalization with, the most important personal information protected.
Because with RAG, RAG has absolutely no opinions about where the data lives. Like Apple Intelligence, I mentioned this in my talk, where they pull data from your device, on your device, and it works offline because it's just talking to a model on device, and the data to be retrieved is your notes, your emails, whatever.
Yeah, that's really great. And do you have to be like a very advanced coder, programmer to do this, or are there any like tools that we can use to try it out?
Yeah, it's a good question. If you know how to retrieve data programmatically, that's actually the only skill you need. That's the only thing you need to know, because you're going to retrieve context and then you're going to retrieve a response from OpenAI. It's just, if you know how to this is the number one skill for people, is learn how to get data from somewhere.
That's cool. And if you were to give like 2 sentences of advice to mid-sized companies regarding the application of AI, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think it would be more spiritual than it would be just to be fearless. I think a lot of companies are very afraid.
Yeah.
And I think this fear is maybe not justifiable, because if the company makes a mistake, I think a healthy company will be able to very quickly recover. So I think instead of avoiding mistakes, the companies could be better at avoiding or could be better at recovering. Yeah, that's what I'm understood. So I think the biggest advice is to teach your company and cultivate internal practices to become resilient as a company, as opposed to avoiding mistakes.
That's a really good advice. And also, companies want to be a part of AI revolution, but are also afraid at the same time.
Exactly.
So it brings a lot of anxiety, but also excitement.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. I know you have plenty of other interviews to do, but it was really great hearing from you.
My pleasure.
And I think this advice would be very useful for you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was
Thank
a real
you.
pleasure talking to you.